Is the pain level that we're going to experience in order to get inflation under control? The Fed has said there's going to be pain.
Yep.
What's it going to look like? What's it going to look like in unemployment? What's it going to look like in business failings? What's it going to look like in defaults?
Well, I think it starts with the fact that we've never really had a significant recession without a liquidity crisis. And, the Fed's been buying $80 billion worth of debt a month. And now the Fed's going to stop buying $80 billion a month. Maybe not the first month, but in a couple of months, that starts to change the game. And it's a liquidity crisis that ultimately forces a difference in behavior.
Again, go back to the UK, we saw it with the pensions and
Sure.
some derivatives they had for some long-term obligations. It often comes up where you least expect it. Long-term capital management, for example.
Yeah.
Where would you be looking right now if you were the Fed to try to find the crack points in the financial system?
Well, I'm continuing to be worried about just overexpansion. The fact that there's ultimately, unlimited demand for U.S. debt. I don't believe that. In the same manner, when I look at what's going on out there, I'm very worried about the reserve currency and the privilege that gives the United States and the flexibility it gives the United States. And if we lose that stature, and we've seen stuff where, Russia and China are trading in either rubles or yuan, or Saudi Arabia is talking about selling oil for yuan. If we lose control of the reserve currency status, you're talking about a significant hit to our standard of living. I mean, to some extent, 10% inflation is the first step toward deteriorating our standard of living. But it's really the ability to issue debt, the ability to be able to generate demand for our product because we are the reserve currency. It gives us an enormous advantage over the rest of the world.
I talked to Ray Dalio recently and asked him about the strength of the dollar. He said it's not the dollar so good, it's just all the other fiat currencies are that much worse.
Terrible. That's right.
So what kind of jeopardy does that put the dollar in if somebody actually figures out a way to do it a little better?
Oh, I think the dollar is in great jeopardy, and that's what I've been worried about, frankly, more than anything else. And we need discipline, and it starts in Washington D.C. Where there has been very little.
So let's talk about Washington, D.C. exactly. I mean, we're in for a rough patch. I think we all agree with that. The question is, how long is the patch and how deep is the problem, right? What policies in Washington could they do or stop doing that might make it better? We have midterm elections coming up.
Yeah. Well, I think that midterm elections are going to end up looking a lot more like what everybody expected initially. In other words, we've had this scenario where 6 or 8 months ago, everybody talked about a red wave. And then about 4 months ago, the newspapers, in their unbiased fashion, all of a sudden started talking about the fact that the red wave wasn't going to happen and that there was going to be a blue wave. And none of the facts suggested that the blue wave would happen. The only thing that suggested it was what the newspapers wrote. And then the newspapers found themselves in this conflict where the underlying reality said, in other words, the people are very worried about inflation. They're very worried about the economy. What did Bill Clinton say? It's the economy, stupid. That hasn't changed. A lot of people thought that Roe versus Wade was going to be the significant crunch point. People are concerned about abortion. They're concerned about a lot of social issues, but that assumes that they could be concerned with a full belly. And I think what we're moving toward is a challenge to that reality.
So Sam, as a significant and very successful investor, do you sort of want the Hippocratic approach to Washington, that is to say, first do no harm? I mean, does a split government actually benefit the investor?
Anything that generates discipline benefits the investor. To the extent that discipline disappears, I mean, look what they did with Joe Manchin. You know, Manchin made a dumb move. He agreed to something before he in quid pro quo for something else, except he gave them what they wanted before they gave him back what he wanted, and he got hung out to dry. That's not discipline. And that bill is, you know, they call it an inflation fighter. All it did was add more wood to the fire.